Hello, my name is Lilian Okibe. Welcome to my channel. I'm sure you've heard by now that the secret to having thick and healthy locks is for you to not retwist often. And I've actually said that before in some of my previous videos, but that is not the complete truth. Like, it is possible for you to experience damage, breakage, thinning locks, bald spots and the likes, even if you do not retwist your locks often. And to be honest with you, sometimes like it may actually be the fact that you do not retwist your locks often that is responsible for this damage. So in this video, we're going to be talking about freeforming and semi-freeforming, as some people may like to call it, and why it may be damaging your locks. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, then please keep on watching. When people say freeform locks or semi-freeform locks, it could mean so many things, right? But what I'm talking about in this video is semi-freeform locks, in the sense that you do not retwist your locks often. Like, you go 3 or more months without retwisting your locks, and then whenever you retwist your locks every 3 or more months, you do it with the conventional retwisting, palm rolling, interlocking, or what have you. Why do I say that semi-freeform locks can damage your locks? There are so many reasons why semi-freeform locks can damage your locks, and let's pick it one by one. So the first instance is that you retwist, you maintain your roots, right, every 3 or more months, right? But in between, you don't do anything to your roots. You do absolutely nothing to your roots. Now, this is something I know that so many people do because they feel that maybe they started out their locks always retwisting and things like that, and now they want their locks to get thicker. So they feel that, oh, if I want my locks to get thicker, then I should stop retwisting as often. So they go ahead and not do anything to their roots. They don't separate, they don't pop, they don't do anything. Then they go ahead, maybe they go to a loctician or they do it themselves. They go ahead and maintain with maybe a retwisting, palm rolling, interlocking every 3 or more months. Some people may go as long as every 6 months. Some people may go as long as, you know, only retwisting once a year. Now, the problem with this is that by default, your hair is constantly shedding and locking and intertwining and marrying and all that, right? So whether you like it or not, your locks marry at the roots. There is nobody on this planet that has locks that doesn't experience some form of marrying and like interconnection at the roots. So for people like this who go long without doing anything to their locks, they do absolutely nothing. They only wash and go. They don't do any form of separating. People like that, what happens is when you wait as long as 3 or more months without, you know, maintaining your roots, you don't retwist and you don't do any form of separating, what happens is that your locks start to marry and merge at the roots. So you're going to have 2 or more locks, different locks, merging together and becoming one, right? Now, the problem with this is that most times when you finally go ahead and retwist, maybe 3 months later or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months later, what happens is you're going to have many of your locks that originally were separated. They have, because you have waited a very long time without, you know, maintaining your roots, those locks start to become one. Those locks start to merge, right? And many people, this is something I have noticed, and even when I watch videos online, this is something I have noticed. Many people who freeform, who semi-freeform in this way, many people, when you finally go ahead and retwist, even if they go to a loctician, many locticians are not patient enough. Now, the thing about taking care of your hair in this way, that you do nothing to your locks for like 3 or more months, is that when you finally go ahead and maintain your roots, when you finally go ahead and retwist or whatever, you're supposed to be very careful. It's like even the Bible says that you should train up a child in a way that he should go, so that when he grows up, he will not depart from it, right? So what happens when you do not train a child? You just allow the child to do whatever he wants to do and wait until when the child is like mature. When you want to come back and at that old age, if you want to start training that child at that old age, you're most likely going to break that child. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the best example, or that's the best analogy to use for this, but that's just how it is. Think of your hair, think of your locks, think of your hair strands as a child or as children, right? When you do not train them and tame them and say like, hey, baby, go this way, follow this lock. Hey, sweetie, go this way, follow this lock. Like, you don't do that. You just allow the locks to do whatever they want to do. You allow them to interact and, you know, make friends and, you know, things like that. Then all of a sudden, 5 months later, you want to come and just boom, rip them apart. You're going to cause a lot of damage. And that's something that so many people do, even many locticians do. When you finally go ahead and say, okay, I want to retwist my locks after a few months, they are not careful and gentle enough, you know, and that's why they go ahead and cause a lot of breakage, a lot of damage. So even though, yes, they are not retwisting their locks very often, the one time they go ahead and retwist their locks, they cause a lot of damage that it will take many months to heal. I don't know if that makes sense. And so this is one of the reasons why you find so many people who, even though they do not retwist their locks often, they still experience thinning, you know, they still experience breakage at their roots, they still experience weak spots on their locks. And that's because even though they do not retwist, when they finally go ahead and retwist their locks, they are not careful, they most likely pop. And you know, you guys, in my last video I talked about popping of locks and why it is so damaging. So if you've not watched that video, I'll link it up in the iCards for you guys to go and watch. They go ahead and carelessly, just quickly, you have not done anything to your locks in like 3, 4, 5 months, then you want to come back and be as quick as someone who does their locks maybe every month. Like, it is not possible. You are going to need to invest a lot more time, a lot more patience, a lot more energy in order for you to be able to adequately separate your locks. And in some cases, depending on how long you go, it may be very, very difficult for you to, like, you're going to need to have the patience of Jesus for you to be able to, you know, you're going to need to call the Lord to give you that patience for you, in order for you to be able to, you know, be kind enough for you to separate the locks in a mild way. And that's why people who freeform or semi-freeform this way tend to have damage, even though they're not retwisting their locks often. Now let's go ahead and talk about the second group of freeform lockers. Those are people who, even though they do not retwist their locks often, maybe every time they wash, or like every few weeks, or like maybe every week or thereabouts, they go ahead and pop their locks. They go ahead and separate their locks, and aka they pop their locks in order to keep the locks separated. Now for this group of people, what happens? I highly recommend you go ahead and watch my last video where I talked about popping of locks. Well, I'm just going to briefly talk about when you, even though you are keeping your locks separated in the sense that you're popping your locks, because you're popping your locks, you're breaking hair strands, you're uprooting hair strands. So what happens? You see that you have you have broken a lot of hair strands. Now you have so many flyaways, you have so many hair strands that are not growing within the lock. You have so many hair strands standing on their own, right? And what happens when you have so many of those hair strands standing on their own? Because you are popping and you're not like incorporating those popped hairs and those like broken hairs back into the lock, what happens is those hairs tend to speed up the marrying at your roots, because the more loose strands you have that are not connected to a lock, the more marrying you're going to have at your roots, right? So when you go ahead and pop and, you know, don't incorporate those pop strands back into the lock, those pop strands will make your locks marry more, and so that will mean you're going to have to pop more, and the more you pop, the more damage you create, just like I talked about in the last video. So at the end of the day, you feel that you are semi-freeforming and you're like, oh, because I've had clients come to me and they're like, hey, I don't know what's going on, my hair is thinning, I'm experiencing some bald spots, my hair is breaking out, my locks are breaking out, things like that, and I don't know what's happening. I have not retwisted my hair in 9 months, I've not retwisted my hair in a year, you know, and things like that. This is why it happens that way. So for people like this, right, the fact that they are not retwisting their locks often may actually be one of the reasons why their locks are experiencing more damage, because the less you retwist and maintain your locks, the more marrying you're going to have at the roots. And if you're not skilled enough, and if you do not have the right information to know how to tackle those hair strands that are standing on their own and that are marrying, you're going to continue to pop and pop and pop and pop, and that's why eventually you're going to have a lot of breakage, a lot of thinning. And because, let me explain to you guys how locks form. Locks form through, okay, normally your hair is trying to marry and everything like that, but you also have your hair constantly shedding. Now when your hair strand sheds, it falls into the lock, you know, and new hair strands start to grow from that hair follicle. So what happens is you have hair that is connected from your roots down into the lock, constantly feeding the lock with shed hairs, and that's why you may start your locks looking as thin as this. Over time, as the years go by, your locks may start to get thicker and become bigger and bigger, you know, that kind of thing. And that's because you have shed hairs constantly being fed into the lock because that lock is connected to the root of your hair through hair strands, you know. So as the hair strands shed, it falls into lock, and that eventually makes your locks thicker. Now when you go ahead and pop and break that connection, so when you go ahead and pop your locks, what you have done is you have broken that hair strand that was previously in the lock, right? You have broken away from the lock. So now when that hair strand sheds, it falls out, probably it falls out. Or maybe if that hair strand eventually, you know, enters another lock, that hair strand is now going to be feeding another lock instead of the lock that it was feeding for maybe a year or like a few months, right? So what happens now? You have, let's say before you had, let's say 10 hair strands feeding that lock. Now because you have popped, let's say you now have 7 hair strands. The size of locks that 7 hair strands will form will not be as big as the size of locks that 10 hair strands will form. And so that means that eventually your locks are going to start to get thinner, and that's because you're popping your locks, and that's because you're popping your locks constantly because you're not maintaining or retwisting your locks often. I don't know if that makes sense. Now, does it mean that everyone who semi-freeforms or, you know, semi-freeform is going to have damaged locks? No. Like I said earlier, the main reason why people who freeform, or who semi-freeform rather, the main reason why they end up experiencing damage is because they want to eat their cake and have it, right? They want to not do anything when it comes to maintenance, right? And when they finally go ahead and maintain, they are not careful and patient enough. You should not be popping your locks. If you are someone that you like to semi-freeform, you should know that, okay, if I'm going to be semi-freeforming, right, that means that if normally if it takes me 1 hour to separate my locks and like retwist my locks every month, right, if I wait 3 months or 6 months or 7 months without retwisting, obviously it should take me way more than that time that it would normally have taken me if I retwisted every month. I don't know if that makes sense. So you should know that if you're semi-freeforming, you should know that whenever you finally go ahead to separate your locks, or whenever you finally go ahead and retwist your locks, you are going to have to be more careful. You are going to have to be more patient, because you're going to have a lot more matting and marrying than someone who does it on who maintains their locks on a consistent basis. Another thing is semi-freeforming can work for people who have bigger locks. So anything from 50 locks or below, like this video doesn't really apply, because for people who have very big locks, your locks are not so tightly spaced, and so the marrying and merging is not going to be so much. So even if you go 5 months, 6 months, 7 months without doing any form of separating and retwisting or whatever to your roots, when you finally come back like 5 months later, it's still going to be a breeze, because number one, you don't have so many locks to deal with, and number two, because your locks are big, they are widely spaced, so you're not going to have as much marrying. So semi-freeforming, I feel like it works a lot. It works perfectly. It works really, really nice for people who have very big locks. Now, if you have anything from 70 locks and above, you need to be more careful if you choose to semi-freeform. You should be aware that your semi-freeforming has its own rules, right? It has its own rules, and it is only for people who are patient. If you know that you're not going to be patient enough to calm down and sit down and take your time to separate without popping, right? Take your time to separate and maintain and retwist your roots, then semi-freeforming is not for you. Then another thing is for those people who semi-freeform but they go ahead and pop their locks. Popping your locks is, over time, if you continue to pop your locks, you're going to experience a lot of damage. You may do, and the thing about locks is that when you start doing all these things, some people may come and tell me, hey, I pop my locks and nothing's happening, my locks are fine, everything blah 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 blah. And it's like, yes, everything blah blah blah, everything is fine. But the thing about locks is, for most times, when you start to do things that damage your locks, you're not going to see the effect immediately. It's going to take months. For many people, it's going to take years before the damage that you have caused starts to show, right? So the fact that you're popping your locks right now and it seems like nothing is happening, just don't think that it will remain like that. A time will come when all that popping that you're doing right now will start to result in issues for you along the line, and you're going to start regretting that you not listened to me when I made this video. So yeah, popping your locks, you should not be popping your locks. If at all, if you're a semi-freeformer and you want to go long without retwisting your locks, right? what you should do is separate your locks, but do not pop. There's a way for you to separate your locks without popping, and that's one of the things I teach in my online course. So if you guys want to enroll, I'm going to leave the link down in the description box. So there are ways to actually separate your locks and keep your locks separated without popping your locks right? And another thing is, I feel like for many people will not have the patience to deal with their hair, even if they do it once every few months. When it's finally time for them to go ahead and deal with their hair, many people are in a rush. Many people, even when you go to a loctician, you're not paying your loctician enough money to only do your hair for that day. For many people, like, you're not going to be willing to pay the amount of money that will allow your loctician to sit down and take his or her time to maneuver his or her way to make sure that they, you know, care for your locks and separate your roots without any form of damage. Most people are not going to be willing to pay. You just want to pay regular money that every other person is paying, and you want them to do a more detailed job. That's not going to happen, because that loctician, him or her, that loctician is there to make money. So there's no way they are going to take their time and, you know, give you that attention that you need. And that's why many times for people who semi freeform, over time, sometimes it seems like they start to experience all these thinning and breakage and things like that along the way. And that's because when they finally come to maintain their roots, whether they are doing it themselves or whether they are going to a loctician, most times they are not careful and patient enough to, you know, separate their roots without popping and without damaging and without breaking hair strands. And that's why many people who semi-freeforming is not actually for them. And that's me being honest with you. I've had clients come to me, so many people. One of the reasons why I'm making this video is because I've had so many people come to me with this same issue. So I just want to talk about it and address it once and for all. Many people who semi-freeforming is not for them, because when they finally come, they just want an easy way out, right? And to be honest with you, if you're looking for an easy way out, it's better for you to do something mild, like the Lilian Okibe maintenance method. Those of you that have watched, you know, that are not new to my channel, you guys have seen it. So, but I'm going to leave a link up in the iCard. So it's better for you to do something mild as Lilian Okibe Locs retwisting method. That is mild enough that it can be done weekly, but you don't even have to do it weekly. Like, if you do something like that, like monthly or every 3 weeks or so, it's better for you to do something mild like that and make it like your consistent, like that's the main way that you maintain your roots, right? Than for you to not do anything or pop your locks and then come back 5 months later to do your regular conventional method. If your goal is for you to have thicker locks, it's better for you to do something mild and do it on a consistent basis than for you to neglect your locks and just allow your locks to marry and merge however they want to merge, then come back later and just do a quick job, you know. And that's one of the reasons why I share that technique with you guys, because I know that there are so many people who like the look of freeform locks. Like, when you see many people, when they see my locks, just assume that I'm a freeformer or I'm a semi-freeformer, because my locks have the look of semi-freeform locks in the sense that they are thick from roots to end. My scalp is like, it looks like my scalp is non-existent, but my scalp is not actually non-existent. Like, all my locks are separated down to the scalp. Like, I don't have any marrying. I'll put a video up in the iCards where I showed you guys all my locks one by one, and you guys will see that my locks are not marrying. Like, I maintain my roots, I maintain my locks on a consistent basis. I do a form of maintenance. I don't do all my hair. Like, every week I go in there and I just do some, you know, maintenance with Lilian Okibe Locs maintenance method for locks that are marrying and merging too much. I do that very often because I like to do that very often, but you don't have to do that very often. But you can do something like that mild, something as mild as that, like every month or like every three weeks or so, right? And then maybe once a year you may go ahead and repeat your conventional way. Like, that will give you better results and less headache and less damage and thicker results than for you to neglect your locks or pop your locks and then retwist however tightly that you want to retwist 5 months, 3 months later. If you guys found this video helpful, if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if this is your first time on my channel and you like to see more videos from me, then definitely subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video.